It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Rishi Sunak backs an investigation into revoking the CBE of the former Post Office boss, Paula Venables. But for some affected by the UK's widest miscarriage of justice, it's too late.
60 have died while they're waiting for compensation, while they're waiting for justice. And that can't be allowed to go on.
In a spin over the Post Office scandal, politicians look to scramble a quick response to the decades-long fight for compensation.
It's down to all the government, all them down at House of Commons, not just one party, all parties. Put your damn heads together, give that lot the money.
Idris Elba lends his Hollywood clout to the anti-knife crime campaign, calling for an instant ban on zombie knives and machetes. After a panel fell from a plane in mid-air, there's more bad news for Boeing tonight as United Airlines finds loose bolts during inspections. Court documents reveal disputed claims that Jeffrey Epstein made sex tapes of celebrities, including Prince Andrew. Tributes to De Kaiser, Germany's Franz Beckenbauer, one of the world's greatest players and managers, has died.
5, 4, 3... We have ignition and liftoff.
Plus, do we have a problem? The first private mission to the moon runs into trouble just hours after takeoff. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. It's been 20 years since the appalling details of the Post Office postmaster scandal began to emerge, but so far no one has been sacked or even held to account over the UK's most widespread miscarriage of justice. Now, after an ITV drama sparked outrage, telling the story of the wrongful criminal convictions of hundreds of innocent people, there's a growing sense among politicians from the Prime Minister down that they should do something quickly. Today, Rishi Sunak said he'd support calls to revoke the CBE awarded to the former head of the Post Office, Paula Venables. But for some, any recompense will come too late, as our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter, reports.
Come on, then.
She lives on her own now, her daughter's dog for company. And at 81, Marion has had 2 decades of this fight. When her late husband Peter died, this funny, car-obsessed family man was a convicted criminal.
It was only when he died, they all said, the one thing I'll miss is his sense of humour. And I said to my daughter, the sad thing is I've forgotten he had one. And that's when you realise just how much he changed.
Her husband had started out as a police officer in Newcastle, so being accused of stealing as a sub-postmaster haunted his final years.
Sorry doesn't cut it. Sorry, we couldn't stand there and say I'm ever so sorry and leave it at that. We had to pay consequences, and so should they.
What happened to Peter here in Newcastle happened to hundreds of other sub-postmasters right across the country. It is, though, a new TV drama that has pulled together all of those stories that has elevated the anger of the British public.
The Post Office prosecuted 736 of their own staff for theft or false accounting. Some were sent to prison. The real culprit was the Horizon computer system installed by tech company Fujitsu. Only 93 of the victims have had their convictions quashed.
The difficult one is the large group of maybe 700, maybe more people whose convictions have not been overturned, so therefore they are not eligible or not yet eligible for compensation.
While the public inquiry is still dissecting this scandal, nobody has ever properly been held to account, from Fujitsu or the Post Office itself. And over 1 million people have now signed the petition for the former Post Office chief executive, Paula Venables, to lose her CBE.
26 grand.
Let's go through those figures again right now.
Not allowed.
Hey?
Suspended. Locked out my own post office till I pay it all back.
Lee Castleton was another who lost everything fighting the Post Office to clear his name.
I think the traumatised victims of the whole thing are still being traumatised by the process. They're being battered into settlement, low settlements. People are coming to the ends of their lives.
That's something Marion sees too. Time running out.
Over 60 have died while they're waiting for compensation, while they're waiting for justice. And that can't be allowed to go on. It can't. There's too many, and it's wrong.
The hard reality is that nothing can now undo the damage done by an institution that we all put faith in. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Newcastle.
Well, the Horizon scandal saw more than 700 branch managers convicted of theft or fraud after a faulty IT system made it look like money was missing from their shops. The Horizon IT system was introduced to the post office in 1999 by the Japanese company Fujitsu, which continues to hold government contracts to this day. Almost immediately, there were discrepancies in the accounting system, and sub-postmasters and postmistresses were wrongly accused of stealing. By 2015, 736 people had been criminally prosecuted, 700 were convicted. In 2020, a public inquiry into the scandal was established. So far, just 93 convictions have been overturned and around £138 million has been paid in compensation to 2,700 postmasters across 3 separate schemes. Well, today, the Prime Minister sought to reassure the victims that he was working to speed up their compensation claims and quash their convictions. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
A stump speech in Accrington to kick off the PM's election year. This marginal red wall seat is what he needs to hold on to have any hope of staying in number 10.
2023 last year was not an easy year for anyone.
But the start of 2024 also far from easy. A scandal not of his making, now giving Rishi Sunak questions to answer. Hundreds of postmasters wrongly criminalised and convicted in the Horizon scandal, still waiting for justice and compensation.
This is an absolutely appalling miscarriage of justice. People should know that we are on it and we want to make this right. The money's been set aside. Now, what we are now looking at is how can we speed all of that up? Thank you very much, everyone.
But inside the room, genuine anger at how long this scandal has dragged out and politicians' failure to act. But do you feel really outraged about it?
I am. I'm outrageous. It's down to all the government, all them down at House of Commons, not just one party, all parties. Put your damn heads together, give that lot the money that they deserve.
In Loughborough, the Labour leader out and about too, with survivors of Storm Henk, clear the government needs to take action and fast.
Compensation needs to be paid. That's already allocated for in the Treasury. They need to get on and pay that.
Questions too for the Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey over his alleged dismissal of victims' concerns during the coalition years when he was the postal minister.
I wish I'd known then what we all know now. The post office was lying on an industrial scale to me and other ministers.
In Westminster, finally action. Postal Minister Keir, the government understands the urgency of the injustice.
We have a clear moral duty to right these wrongs to the best of our ability. To support those lives who were turned upside down by this scandal, we have provided significant funding for compensation. And we have been clear that it should not be the taxpayer alone who picks up the tab.
Kevin Hollinrake announcing ministers are drawing up plans to fast-track compensation and quash convictions. Rishi Sunak wanted to kick off the new year with a message to voters, stick with me. But instead, this Prime Minister, already hounded by the contagion of the Johnson and Truss premierships, now finds himself weighed down by what happened under David Cameron's watch over this post office debacle. And the danger for the Prime Minister is that a scandal not of his making only serves to bring his government down further still. Yet another mess left behind by a predecessor, clouding this PM's pitch. He wants to be the fresh start, but 13 years of the Tories' track record getting in his way again. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's get more from our chief political correspondent, John Craig. So what happens now then, John, and how can they inject speed into a process which seems to have taken decades?
Well, there are calls for legislation to speed things up. Now, what's happened tonight? You saw Kevin Hollingreight, the Postal Affairs Minister, in Beth's report there. He's just, within the past hour, just finished answering questions. His statement and questions lasted 2¼ hours. The chamber was absolutely packed, reflecting the widespread concern and anger of MPs of all parties about this scandal. Mr. Hollingreight was sympathetic to all the calls for tough action. You heard him in Beth's report say it shouldn't just be taxpayers who cough up for compensation. Go after Fujitsu, the computer company, said Jonathan Reynolds, the Shadow Business Secretary, and Priti Patel, the former Tory Home Secretary, whose father was a sub-postmaster. Now, there was an absolute plethora of demands on Mr. Hollingreight, and he was sympathetic to just about all of them. For example, Sir David Davis, newly knighted, called for 4 things. 1, accelerate the appeals process. 2, accelerate the compensation process. 3, take away the Post Office's right to prosecute. And 4, get on with the investigations into possible perjury and perverting the course of justice. Yes to all 4, said Mr. Hollingreight. Now, the statement was billed as compensation and convictions. He's the Post Office Minister, a business minister. He was talking more about the compensation than the legal side. So it's over to the Lord Chancellor, Alex Chalk, now. Mr. Hollingreight had talks with him today. MPs who are campaigning on this have also met the Lord Chancellor. And Mr. Hollingreight promised that hopefully this week we'll get an announcement from Mr. Chalk, the Lord Chancellor, Justice Secretary, of legal moves to overturn those convictions. That could come in the form of fast-track legislation, which is what senior lawyers in Parliament like Sir Robert Buckland, a former Justice Secretary, were demanding. Mr. Hollingreight was sympathetic to that.
We'll look out for the changes ahead. John, thank you. The actor Idris Elba has told Sky News it's time to push knife crime to the forefront of the political agenda. The star of Luther and The Wire is calling for an immediate ban of machetes and zombie-style knives. He's joined forces with families who've lost loved ones across the country. Sky's Ivor Bennett reports.
Outside Parliament today, a disturbing depiction of the human cost of knife crime. Each bundle of clothes represents a life lost to a blade on Britain's streets. 247 in the year to June. It's part of a campaign to end knife crime led by Hollywood star Idris Elba, who says the challenge is to tackle the misconceptions.
The misconceptions are really broad, from the fact that, that it's some underground belly you get these knives. No, if you're old enough, you can buy one from your phone and it can get delivered to you by the postal service. Okay, it's not an underground scenario. It's not just a black issue. It's not just a London issue. It's a nationwide issue, and it's growing.
All right, so this is the big one right here. This is a machete.
The actor's calling for an immediate ban on machetes and so-called zombie knives, deadly weapons that often glamorise violence but rip families apart. Yemi Hughes lost her son Andre in 2016. He was just 19 when he was stabbed to death in Croydon, South London.
It just turns your whole life upside down. For me, I dropped my son off. He was smiling, happy, healthy. And within 20 minutes, I was getting a phone call to say that he was dying. It takes a real lot of energy to kind of get your life back on some kind of track, which it never will be the same.
The government first tried to ban zombie knives in 2016, but loopholes in the legislation have allowed sales to continue. And all the time, young lives continue to be lost. 15-year-old Eliane Andam was killed with what was believed to be a zombie knife on her way to school in September, while 16-year-old Harry Pittman was stabbed to death in London on New Year's Eve. This boxing gym was set up to keep young people out of trouble after its founder lost her son to knife crime 10 years ago, a decade in which she says the problems got worse.
A lot of things are being said that's going to be done, but they're not actually being done. And that's why it's getting worse. Unless we deal with the causes and we deal with what is needed, it will get worse and worse and worse, and there's no change. And this is life. It's a matter of life and death now.
The government admits more needs to be done to tackle the root causes of knife crime, while campaigners hope they now have a voice that cannot be ignored. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
There's been more bad news for Boeing tonight in the aftermath of a window and chunk of fuselage blowing out of one of its Alaska Airlines planes in midair. United Airlines says it has found loose bolts on what's called plug doors during its inspection of its 737 MAX 9 planes. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner joins me now. So what has United said then, Martha, as these planes remain grounded in the States?
Yeah, they do. This is causing widespread disruption for the affected airlines. 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes, Anna. So that's the type of aircraft that was involved in this mid-air explosion for Alaska Airlines on Friday. 171 of them have been taken out of service since then, ordered to be grounded by the FAA, which is the body in charge of airline safety in the United States. Just within hours of inspections taking place on some of those airlines, United Airlines has announced that some of the bolts on the plug doors, so that's the part of the airline, the part of the aircraft that was lost on Friday on this Alaska Airlines flight, they've found some of those bolts needed to be tightened. We have a statement from United Airlines just in the last few minutes saying, "We're working to return our Boeing 737 MAX 9s to service in the days ahead. Since we began preliminary inspections on Saturday, we have found instances that appear to relate to installation issues in the door plug. For example, bolts that needed additional tightening." Just to give people an idea of which part of the plane we're talking about, it is a similar sized area to the emergency exits, but on this particular plane, that emergency exit was plugged over. And in fact, part of that Alaska Airlines flight was found just yesterday. A school teacher named Bob from Portland, Oregon, which is where that plane took off from. You can see that aircraft in midair there. He found that door plug in his garden. That was then taken away by inspectors to try and find some clues to what exactly happened on board this aircraft. You can only imagine how frightening it must have been. The area of the plane that was lost, that was closest to row 12 of this aeroplane, but throughout that plane, people saying they were fearing for their lives, texting their relatives to say goodbye. You can imagine that this will result in increased nerves among airline passengers, and as a result, we see Boeing's stock dipping down 8% by the end of day today, as reflecting fears that this may be a systematic issue with these aircrafts.
Martha, joining us there from LA. Thank you. New court documents released in the US have revealed claims by a victim of Jeffrey Epstein who alleged that sex tapes had been made involving Prince Andrew, Sir Richard Branson and Bill Clinton. A spokeswoman for Mr Branson has called the claims baseless and unfounded. Prince Andrew has always denied any wrongdoing. Well, Ashna Hurinag is here with me now. So what have we learnt from these documents, Ashna, and how cautiously should we be reading them?
Well, they were initially shared in court by Epstein's defence team, specifically the firm representing his lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, essentially to undermine the allegations made by this witness, calling them far from truthful and saying that they lacked credibility. They revolve around a string of emails between Sarah Ransom, who says she was one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, and emails that she sent to a journalist in 2016. In those emails, she claims that Epstein took sex tapes of Prince Andrew, Sir Richard Branson, and of former US President Bill Clinton. She said that she had seen those films of those people having sex with young women. Now, Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton have previously denied any wrongdoing connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And a spokesperson on behalf of Sir Richard Branson, the Virgin Group, has said in a New Yorker report published in 2019, Sarah Ransom admitted that she had invented the tapes. We can confirm, they go on to say, that Sarah Ransom's claims are baseless and unfounded. And indeed, in a 2019 article, Ms Ransom did say that she had invented the claims because she wanted to draw attention to Epstein's behaviour and to make him believe that she had evidence that would come out if he harmed her. These documents being released are all part of a civil lawsuit which was settled out of court in 2017 between Virginia Giuffre, one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, and Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently in prison for serving up to 20 years for sex trafficking offences. This is, worth saying, the second tranche of documents we've had, more to come later down the line. But even though there has been no allegation of any wrongdoing of those we've just named, any form of connection to such a prolific sex offender and paedophile such as Jeffrey Epstein is uncomfortable.
Ashna, thank you. Israel has been blamed for the killing of a senior Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. It comes as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken lands in Israel after meetings in Qatar and Saudi Arabia as he tries to prevent a wider conflict from spiralling. Meanwhile, aid organisations have pulled their staff out of the Al-Aqsa hospital in Gaza, where the humanitarian situation is getting worse. Here's our Middle East correspondent, Alastair Bunkle.
For months, Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging fire across the Lebanese border. Today, an Israeli airstrike killed the deputy commander of Hezbollah's elite Radwan force. He is the most senior Hezbollah fighter to be killed in the 3-month war so far, and it again raises the stakes. Benjamin Netanyahu visited troops in northern Israel today. His government says that it is running out of patience.
We will do whatever it takes. Of course, we prefer that this be done without a wide campaign, but that will not stop us. We gave Hezbollah an example of what is happening to their friends in the south. That is what will happen here in the north.
At the same time, the US Secretary of State was continuing his extensive tour of the Middle East, trying to prevent a war between Israel and Lebanon. Antony Blinken met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. Israel is his next stop.
It's clearly not in the interest of anyone, Israel, Lebanon, Hezbollah for that matter, to see this escalate.
Blinken will also push Israel to wind up intensive military operations in Gaza and allow more humanitarian aid in. Al-Aqsa Hospital, the last functioning trauma centre in central Gaza, is close to collapse. Médecins Sans Frontières says it is being forced to pull its staff from the hospital.
We departed from the hospital on Saturday. On Sunday and also today on Monday, we have seen that actually part of the hospital was targeted by drones, intensive fire on the courtyard of the hospital, but also in some departments.
Israel says it is entering a new, lower tempo phase in Gaza, but there seems to be little evidence of that yet. Hundreds more civilians have fled the centre of Gaza. Many of them have been displaced many times now. Israel has repeatedly said the south is safe, but it isn't, and there is little shelter or food being allowed in for them. Israel's war in Gaza is making life there almost unlivable. Alastair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Franz Beckenbauer, one of the world's greatest footballers, has died at the age of 78. He was one of only 3 men to win the World Cup as both a player and a manager. Known as Der Kaiser, he was involved in a number of memorable games against England. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
German football is synonymous with success because of one man, Franz Beckenbauer, the World Cup winning captain in 1974, who won it again in 1990, his first trophy as a coach in his first coaching job. It's why Beckenbauer was Der Kaiser, or the Emperor, an imperious footballer who reshaped perceptions of Germany and was a visionary on the pitch.
He was a fantastic player, technically gifted. He was a libero, the sweeper. He invented that position. He was so stylish and elegant. It's as a player, he was fantastic, obviously as a coach, because he understood the game.
His only losing World Cup final was at Wembley in 1966, after being nullified by Bobby Charlton.
to change his tactics.
But 4 years later, Beckenbauer's goal in the quarter-finals ended England's reign as world champions. The 70s was Beckenbauer's decade. Joining the World Cup, 3 European Cups and German titles were won in a row, captaining Bayern Munich, and he led them to silverware from the dugout in the 90s. Then came the third chapter of his career, winning votes for Germany to host the 2006 World Cup. Although what became known as Germany's fairy tale summer was clouded in controversy for him, with bribery investigations ending his leading role at FIFA. Beckenbauer accepted mistakes were made, but insisted there was no corruption. And it is as the footballer who inspired generations remembered after he died in his sleep on Sunday.
He stood for more than football, because in the 60s and the 70s, as you had all over Europe, there was a spirit of revolution, of people finding new ideas in society. And his football sort of epitomized that sense of lightness, that sense of doing away with the old, finding new ways, expressing yourself, having long hair, all these things. And of course, things changed when he became a little bit old in the 80s and 90s. He became very much part of the establishment. But there was this sense that he represented a younger, a different, a more beautiful West Germany, if you will.
West Germany's last tournament was the 1990 World Cup, pre-unification after the fall of the Berlin Wall. England beaten in the semi-finals before the crowning moment of Beckenbauer's career. Influential on and off the pitch, remembered for his grace and greatness, one of football's all-time greats. Rob Harris, Sky News.
And another passing now. The British and Irish Lions rugby great JPL Williams has died at the age of 74. Williams captained Wales 55 times and was part of the victorious Lions tour to New Zealand in 1971 and South Africa 3 years later. The first US mission to put a lander on the moon in 50 years has been hit by a technical problem which could scupper the mission. Peregrine Mission 1 aims to become the first US spacecraft to land on the moon's surface since Apollo 17 in 1972. But soon after takeoff, it developed a problem with the solar panels which charge its batteries. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket.
The launch was textbook, lifting American dreams of returning to the moon with a private company, not NASA, at the controls. But several hours into the journey, the space startup Astrobotic said a problem in the propulsion system meant they couldn't control the spacecraft, and the mission was in jeopardy.
What we often find is things that are relatively simple to conduct on Earth are very difficult to conduct when you get into space. That's not least because this exquisite space technology has had to survive such a difficult start in life with the shaking of the launch and all the wide degrees of temperature variation.
Hopes had been high that this would be the first commercial lunar landing. It was being done on a shoestring, but NASA said bringing in private companies would drive innovation. Private rocket companies have already made it far cheaper and easier to put satellites in orbit. NASA now hopes that involving commercial enterprises will lead to the same revolution for lunar exploration. The UK's Open University helped build one of 5 NASA experiments on board, an instrument for studying water molecules in the moon's incredibly thin atmosphere. A commercial mission has brought a new way of working.
There is a greater appetite for risk, and that allows us to be more agile, to do things more quickly, to develop systems which are more adventurous, more bold, because there's an understanding that that's what we're doing.
Let's go to the moon.
But the science experiments are being carried alongside more controversial cargo, including a marketing stunt by the manufacturer of a sports drink and a capsule containing cremated human remains, a payload that has angered Indigenous Americans who regard the moon as sacred. NASA's not responsible, but it's awkward.
Historically, there has been political pressure on them to democratize access to space. But again, there's this underside then that I think you need to think about in terms of whether or not we're comfortable with advertising being done on the moon, issues around sustainability.
Efforts to improvise a fix and save the mission seem to have failed. In the year that NASA hopes to send astronauts to loop around the moon, this underlines the perils of space travel. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Quirrell. Welcome to both of you. And among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Metro, 1 million say stripped Post Office Paula of her CBE. That is their lead. Back with that and plenty more after this break. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The Prime Minister says he would support a Commons committee if it decided to review the CBE of Paula Venables, who was Post Office Chief Executive during the Horizon software scandal. Court documents reveal disputed claims that Jeffrey Epstein made sex tapes of celebrities, including Prince Andrew. And the first US mission to put a lander on the moon in 50 years has been hit by a technical problem which could scupper the mission. Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and the Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar. Welcome to both of you. So let's check out the front pages then, shall we? Starting with the Metro, which leads on the petition to strip former Post Office CEO Paula Venables of her CBE. It's now reached more than 1 million signatures. Daily Mail focuses on the same thing with the headline, Shameless. The Eye reports that the Fujitsu, the IT firm responsible for creating the faulty Horizon system, has been awarded a major government contract. The Guardian says ministers have drawn up urgent plans to clear the names of wrongly convicted sub-postmasters. The Times, with the same lead there, fast appeals for wrongly convicted postmasters. The Sun, meanwhile, focuses on allegations that Jeffrey Epstein made sex tapes of Prince Andrew, Sir Richard Branson and Bill Clinton. All those accused strongly deny the claims. The Daily Mirror splashes with the same story, calling it the new Andrew humiliation. The Telegraph leads on Channel 4. It says it has launched a protest against the appointment of 4 white directors to its board. Financial Times front page reads, deluge of debt feeds fear of a backlash in the bond markets, with reports investors are warning governments around the world over unmoored levels of public debt. The Daily Star focuses on the difficulties faced by the lunar rocket launch today, saying it hit a little bit of a snag. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So, joined by Mark Wallace and Pippa Crerar, welcome to both of you. Nearly a clean sweep for a number of newspapers on the Post Office scandal. The question now, Pippa, is whether there is some fast-tracking mechanism to get this sorted.
Yeah, we've heard hints from the Prime Minister yesterday when he appeared on broadcast, and then again today when he was out at his PM Connects event in Accrington, that they want to speed up the process of both the speed with which people can get the compensation that they are seeking. And a key part of that is obviously overturning their convictions in the first instance. And there are hundreds of people who were wrongly convicted as a result of this faulty software over a period of about 15 years. And a sort of, some of them have gone through the appeals process and others haven't felt able, because it's been such a traumatic experience, losing their life savings, losing their businesses, being accused of wrongdoing, in some cases ending up in jail. And sadly, in a few cases, even of taking their own lives. So the pressure has been on the government in the last few days, and they've hinted that they do want to do more. And what we heard this evening, in fact, just before I came over to your studios, I was watching a statement in the Commons from Kevin Hollinrake, the Post Office Minister, who was spelling out how much the government had done so far. I mean, there's a public inquiry and millions have already been paid out in compensation, but how he wants more to be done, and done quickly. And I was really struck by actually how much cross-party consensus there was right across the House, a recognition that actually a lot of politicians had been campaigning about this for a very long time, that yes, it needs to speed up, but they're not coming to this fresh, and they do have some ideas. The point, I think, is that people are wanting answers right now, like within the next few days, and that's sort of the pressure point for the government now. Can it get really quite complicated legislation? Potentially, that's the way they do it through. Can it come up with a scheme? So
this would be a mass overturning of the convictions.
There's a couple of different options.
Legislation.
They could bring in legislation that would automatically quash convictions. They could allow postmasters to appeal en masse, to have those overturned, or they could block the Post Office from challenging appeals from victims. So there's a 3 of the ways that they could try and deal with this very, very quickly. But it does feel, certainly from listening to the statement tonight, that they want to bring forward the idea by the end of the week, so the next few days. Obviously, it could then take a little bit longer to actually implement.
Yeah, the cost of this must be quite extraordinary. We heard during the ITV's TV drama on this that one sub-postmaster, Lee Castleton, was then demanded, when he lost his case, £300,000 in Post Office costs. You times that by the 700 people convicted. You add compensation to that. I mean, this has been an absolute drain on post office stroke the taxpayers' resources, hasn't it? And it could all have been dealt with so much differently right back in the day.
Many, many years ago. And that's why it's very, very welcome that there's this cross-party consensus, as Pippa says. It's very welcome that these different routes are being explored to, firstly, set right the record and start, at least begin to try and restore some of the esteem and reputation that people lost, which I think is something that you've heard so many times be at the heart of so much of people's distress, and then start to restore the money that was, frankly, robbed from them, as far as I can see, the further damages that are due for all the distress and so on and so forth. It's welcome that that's happening, but far, far too late. And the fact is that this is in a lot of people's minds now because of this excellent TV drama. I've started watching, haven't yet finished, but you know, what's Toby Jones not great in? I
crashed it over the weekend, having worked last week during it, you know, but it was addictive once I started.
Exactly, and it's in people's minds because of that, but it hasn't just come to light.
No.
This has been going for years and years and years. Yeah. There are various...
journalists in particular with podcasts and panoramas who, you know, who's driven this too.
Exactly. Yeah. There are various allegations. You know, there's a full inquiry going on. There's various allegations, and it's still not clear exactly when parts of the post office at which different level did know that something was actually wrong. There are allegations that some parts of that organisation may have persisted despite knowing that it didn't have the leg to stand on that it thought it did. There's all sorts of implications to this, which we still need to bottom out. But this can't keep dragging on for the actual victims of this to continue without proper restitution. I mean, it is understandable to get through those two principles. One of when is it OK for the executive or for Parliament to effectively mass overrule the judiciary by reversing things? Is that a principle you want to mess with? And second, interestingly, from some of the victims' campaigners, a few concerns that there might be some people who might accidentally be pardoned for stuff they have actually done, or have a convictions over some stuff they have actually done wrong. It would seem to me, not as a lawyer, that the mass appeal approach is probably the simpler route rather than legislation, but I credit to Alex Chalk for getting on with it. It's a great shame that a lot of people didn't in the previous decade.
In the meantime, you know, people are in crosshairs now, aren't they? And it's whether that's a fair thing or not. If we go to the Metro, 1 million people now say that Paula Venables, you know, one of the CEOs during this period, she's not the only one, should be stripped of her CBE. And certainly the Prime Minister has indicated that he'd be quite happy to see an investigation into that, Pippa.
Yeah, Downing Street told us this morning that the Prime Minister shared the public's feeling of outrage about the scandal, and that he would strongly support the Honours Forfeiture Committee if it decided to review her CBE. Now, it's not actually the Prime Minister's gift or any politician's gift to make a decision such as stripping an honour from somebody in this way, but there's this committee which is chaired by a senior civil servant, and if they decide to investigate and then conclude that actually she has brought the system into ill repute, that they could strip her of it. It has happened with honours in the past. In the debate this evening, there was a lot of discussion about whether she should do the honourable thing and return the honour rather than having it stripped from her. And you think possibly that if she wanted to save face, then that might be, and also, I guess, a gesture, an acknowledgement of some of the hurt that the Post Office has caused, then that might be a way of doing it. But I think we're at the early stages of that. You know, it's not just, of course, although she was the chief executive at this time, when the Post Office were continuing to insist to ministers and to officials and to the postmasters themselves that the Horizons IT system was working perfectly well. She wasn't the only person, obviously, who was responsible for it. She was the boss, buck stops there, all of that. But I think part of what the inquiry needs to do is get to the bottom of who knew what and when. We've heard a lot from government ministers, successive Post Office ministers over that period, most notably Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader. I spoke to him today because there's been quite a lot of suggestions that he has questions to answer. Well, you know, does he have more or less questions to answer than the 14 other Post Office ministers over that period? Probably not. We probably know why the focus is on him right now. But nevertheless, ministers, officials, Post Office, Fujitsu, the company behind the Horizon scheme, there's still lots of questions outstanding about what they knew and when.
Yes, and Fujitsu is the focus of the Daily Telegraph. If we take a look, Fujitsu may be forced to foot the bill for the Post Office scandal. Certainly in the comments tonight, the Post Office Minister was saying, you know, they're looking elsewhere in terms of who should pay for this compensation. Yeah. Around £138 million has already been paid to victims, of course. Ministers are considering, it says, chasing Fujitsu for millions of pounds in compensation for the victims. And at the end of watching the drama and reading all of this, this, you still don't quite know what went wrong here. Was it people going into the system? Was it blips and bugs? You feel like the public inquiry can't come soon enough, in other words. But anyway, should other Fujitsu be chased, do you think, to pay for some of this?
Well, there seems an extremely strong case for that, because we're in this, as Pippa mentioned, we're in this peculiar kind of pass-the-parcel phase of this story. Now it's exploded into the public, into the public's mind. Now there's 1 million people signing a petition here. There's mass outrage. There's statements in Parliament on the front page of almost every newspaper. There's a desperate game of pass the parcel going on, and that's why you see, the eyes on Paula Venables and this million signature. She could probably pass that parcel on by choosing to give up the CBE. Whoops, Ed Davies got it, and now he's saying, well, actually, I was misled by Post Office executives. Ministers should be taking very seriously what they might have done wrong. Onto ministers, back around onto Fujitsu. Of course, the real answer is, the point of the inquiry is finding out what each of these different stages and organisations involved got wrong. We should also find out what, if anything, any of them got right, so we could do a bit more of that. Because while this was obviously a technical flaw, what allowed it to get so out of hand, what allowed it to persist, and what allowed it to be what I think then exacerbated by being pursued in such a almost in the manner of a persecution against some of these unfortunate victims, is a question of culture, and that's about certainly corporate culture, could be a question of political culture or
brand reputation as well.
Well, exactly.
It's about protecting the brand, as in the Post Office. They were calling themselves the most trusted brand in Britain at the time, protecting that at all costs. We've seen now the costs are going to be enormous, personally and financially.
And this idea that having the temerity to blow the whistle in someone else's interests, or God forbid in your own defence, is somehow actually disloyalty and is something that ought to be punished rather than make people sit up and listen, is something we've seen in a lot of really major institutions, public sector and private sector, UK and international and supranational indeed. But from my point of view, if you supply a service or a bit of technology that creates a big old bill for the taxpayer and causes a scandal, I think it should be quite unsurprising that the people standing up for the taxpayers' interests, ministers and the government, should be coming back, looking at the terms of that contract and asking if we can have some of our money back, please.
Yeah, OK. We've got lots to pack in the next part of our programme, so we'll head to the break now. So more of the stories making the news, including this in the Metro, which says China has arrested a spy sent by the UK to collect state secrets for MI6.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
Well, there's a real sense now that people are beginning to expect that this whole airlift is coming to an end, and they're really, really desperate. We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people and putting them into trucks.
You either live and recover, or you die.
OK, so that's like a war.
That's the war, yes.
We help you understand the world with us.
Over the past 24 hours, the soldiers have been attacked on a number of occasions. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We're being crushed.
To take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. They were convinced the United States would become hooked. Well, they were right.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
It's not out of control, but if we're drawn, it's so hot.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Mark Wallace and Pippa Crerar. Welcome back to both of you. So who wants to do the China MI6 and the arrested spy?
I could kick off on this if you like. I mean, it's quite, from what we do know about this story, it's quite interesting. It's got all the makings of a kind of traditional spy thriller. China has arrested a foreigner who they accuse of having been trained by. They accuse MI6 of training this person to gather intelligence on behalf of the UK. But one of the reasons I think it's quite striking as a story is obviously we've seen some allegations of potential alleged Chinese spying operations in Britain. We've seen elements of threats and intimidation from various different people, including Chinese state officials targeted at Hong Kongers and Chinese dissidents based in this country. We've seen political disruption and intimidation alleged on university campuses in the UK. What a difference it must be for David Cameron, now as Foreign Secretary, having to deal with this, leading the department to which MI6 reports, for example, now in these tensions compared to when he was Prime Minister. Remember the golden age of relations between...
The pint in the pub.
London and Beijing. China was going to just fund all of our national infrastructure. It would probably be fine. They could do all the internet and nuclear power stations and stuff too. Yeah. Quite how much it's changed. I think it's quite remarkable to think how recent it was that was supposedly what we were going to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk moon, shall we? Or not quite the moon yet. The solar panels aren't quite working. Quite an extraordinary mission, really. Privately run, but the first time the US is involved in this way since 1972. And Apollo 17, it's in the FT. Oh, do you want mine?
I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, there we go. Yes, it's a great picture, isn't it? Yeah, so this was the first private step towards putting humans back on the moon. I still think that our children's generation will be popping off to the moon for weekends or for their holidays. But it ran into trouble because the solar panels, as you said, the solar panels on board were not aligning properly with the sun, and obviously it wasn't getting the power it requires. So they're keeping a close eye on it to see what happens, next. The Star has also got that on the front page. Apparently taken Star Trek actors' ashes to the moon. So it wasn't just a scientific mission; it was also a sort of a celebrity one as well.
Yeah. Which is difficult, isn't it, from some indigenous groups who hold the moon in great esteem as a sort of, sacrosanct area, and you don't put ashes on it. Anyway, that's a completely separate issue. But the whole point is that, for the first time, NASA's not, as you say, it's private. So you get all these contracts like ashes arriving in order to help fund it, and then it throws off its own spin-off problems. But anyway, hopefully they'll right it so it faces the sun and it can power itself to do its job. Absolutely, and actually, I mean, our company does some bits and bobs in the kind of, not ourselves in the space sector, but with businesses and organisations that kind of work in the space sector.
He's going to be the first to go for book a weekend there.
I don't know. It's quite a heavy payload to be lifted up that high. Might have to see how the New Year's resolutions play out in the next few months before they're willing to take me. But it is. The involvement, the kind of private sector and all this kind of stuff is genuinely really, really interesting. I mean, there's all sorts of... The UK, despite having only just got into the spaceport business, has a surprisingly big kind of sector in space. Universities putting up micro-satellites where they work out ways to fit them in the niches and the gaps around other people's satellites and their rocket launchers, doing all sorts of stuff to give farmers in the developing world live weather information that they couldn't previously get easy access to. It's really, really interesting. While this one has had a bit of a bumpy ride so far, I think the idea of having human beings back on the moon rather than just rovers. Rovers are good, but human beings back on the moon I think would be a welcome step, and it would get the 21st century back to being the sci-fi we were all kind of promised.
Yeah, and as a stepping post to Mars, obviously, which is the big prize. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Mark, Pippa, thank you. We'll see you for more in the 11. Right now, let's take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look mostly quiet and cold, with a stiff breeze bringing a significant wind chill to many. There'll be a mainly dry start tomorrow with a widespread hard frost, bringing a few icy stretches. There'll be some wintry showers as well in the south. Central and southern England can expect some freezing fog. The morning will turn out mainly dry and sunny, with cloud and lingering showers over southern Britain, largely clearing west. But the far south of Ireland may catch a wintry shower or two as well. Eastern England may see the odd coastal shower, while fog over Scotland will be reluctant to clear. It'll stay cold with a keen wind for central and southern parts. Any remaining showers in the southwest will clear later, leaving it fine into the evening. Wednesday looks mostly dry, quite sunny in the south and the west. Northeastern Britain will be fairly cloudy with a little rain, drizzle, hill snow in places. Cold again after a frosty start.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, our news review continues in Sky News at 11. We'll bring you the very latest on the post office scandal as Rishi Sunak comes under more pressure to act fast and help the hundreds of people affected.